Welcome to the Bros Talking Soccer podcast. My name is Dave Knittel. I'm very excited to have Mike Steenstra on from the Rooster the Devil podcast. Mike, hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And so for anyone watching live on YouTube, hello, welcome. Mike, I forgot to tell you this. I'm going to just welcome the YouTube viewers, and then I will we'll do basically another intro.
How many jokers you got out there on any given day? You got a bunch out?
It really varies. So right now, it looks like we do have one person here. So hello, viewer. We get anywhere from 3 to 10 people tuning in live, and then we get a bunch of views in the future. So if you're watching live, say hello, interact with us as we go along here, ask us questions. It's always fun to kind of have that live interaction. If you're watching in the future, still leave a comment. We can circle back and all of that. But hello, I guess from the past because you're in the future. All right, Mike, any final questions or anything like that before we get into it?
No, I think I'm ready to roll. Let's give it a shot.
All right, let's do it. I'd like to welcome on Mike Steenstra from the Rooster and the Devil podcast. Mike, welcome to Bros Talking Soccer. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you for being here. So I'd like to start with this. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and how you got into the sport of soccer?
Sure. So I am originally from New Jersey, live in the DC area now. I grew up mainly watching football and basketball. I actually got so into basketball that I was a reporter for a Japanese basketball magazine, actually. But I went to Wizards games and All-Star games and basketball, everything. I've had some pretty cool experiences through that. I got to play pickup with Kevin Durant, did a little one-on-one interview with him, Victor Oladipo, Dwayne Wade, got a one-on-one with him. So my whole world revolved around basketball until about 2 years ago when I have a couple friends that, they've been into English Premier League for a couple years. So I was like, I'll check it out. Didn't really have a team, but started getting fed Tottenham information by one of the Roosters from our podcast. We call him the Rooster. And all of a sudden, next thing I knew, I was not missing a single Tottenham game. I was super into Premier League. I was already starting to fall out of love with basketball. I think part of that was seeing behind the curtain and not loving, the way the game evolved into kind of a three-point shooting contest and all that. And I just love everything about soccer. No stoppage, no commercials. The way the ball moves around the field, I'm just addicted.
I love it, man. Okay, so obviously it's a soccer podcast, but I got to ask, you covered basketball for a Japanese magazine. How did that come about?
When I first moved to Maryland, I didn't have a whole lot of friends, and my wife was taking her CPA exam, so she didn't have a whole lot of time for me. So I started covering local DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia high school basketball. And I did get to see like Jeremy Grant and Victor Oladipo in high school, which is pretty cool. But there was a guy, KJ Matsui, who played on Montrose Christian, who's a Japanese guy. I randomly wrote a little blurb about him just on a local, high school basketball website. Japanese editor found it. And next thing I know, he sends me an email. He's like, "Oh, are you interested in covering NBA?" And keep in mind, I'm only writing for like a high school basketball website at the time. I thought it was like a joke, but I wrote back. I was like, all right, yeah, sure, I'll see where this rabbit hole goes. And then next thing I know, the very first thing I did was this Nike Kevin Durant shoe launch. And I'm playing pickup basketball with him. I'm interviewing him. I was nervous as shit because it was like the first time I had ever interviewed anyone of that caliber. But that's just kind of where it went. And that was, at this point, 8 years ago. So I've been doing that for a very long time, and I've got a lot of good friends. And funny enough, the Wizards, where I'm located, just drafted Rui Hachimura from Gonzaga, so I might be down there again this year, and we'll see.
Wow, that's great. The internet's just a wild place, like just the people you can get connected with. So that's a really cool story.
I mean, through that too, I'm in fantasy football league with Australians. I've got my best friend down here is from Puerto Rico. The Japanese editor, me and him are great friends, and yeah, the internet is a weird, wild place, which brings us to you and I talking right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so steering it back to soccer in your podcast, so you do it along with two others. And so, what are their names and how do you guys all know each other?
Sure. So the podcast Rooster and the Devil, it's focused on Tottenham and Man United, which is what the other two guys are. Brad Tyndall, the other Rooster, has been watching for about 6 seasons now. And then Jimmy, the Devil portion of the podcast, he's been a lifelong Man United fan. So we used to do Google Hangouts, just kind of hanging out because we're old, drinking beer, and they would eventually evolve into all soccer talk. And I had done a podcast for NBA for a while, and I was like, well, we talk enough soccer. Maybe we should try a podcast. And how I view it for myself is I just ask all the naive questions. So the purpose of the podcast is really for an American audience, and especially if you're new into soccer, to introduce you into the game, because I am asking all the naive questions that a newbie would be asking. So that's kind of where it started, and that's how it's going.
We've
been
cool.
going since January of last year, so going pretty well.
Awesome. So like a year and a half or so?
Actually just January 2019. So,
so like half, okay, very cool. Yeah. So it's kind of very recent.
Very recent. We're very dedicated. We record every Tuesday night, drop the pod every Wednesday, and then during the international breaks, we cover a lot of USMNT and try to bring folks who know a lot about that on the podcast.
Cool. So the name is very unique, and so is it based on the fandom? Is that where the Rooster and the Devil comes from? Tottenham and United?
Yeah, we were gonna go like the Devil and the Cock first, but Cock, Rooster.
Yeah,
that's I don't know. We just kind of came up with it through text messages. I'm not so sure it's good branding, but whatever. It works.
I do. I think it's interesting. And first off, it's unique. And then on top of it, I think you were smart to go with Rooster over Cock, just because you don't know what might get flagged in, titles. Apple can be very stingy about what you have in there. So I think that was smart. And again, I think it conveys that you're Tottenham and United fans, and it is kind of unique. So I personally liked it. And then your logo is interesting. Where'd that come from?
The logo is really just the Tottenham logo and the Red Devil, which at some point we probably do have to redesign that because it's just blatant thievery, just kind of switched around. I've been meaning to do that, but at this point, no one from Tottenham or Man U has flagged us down yet, so it seems to be okay. But it will change. I
think you can evolve that relatively easily. So I don't think you have to worry too much about it. And so you touched on kind of how you became a Tottenham fan. It was kind of a little bit of an evolution. I guess why Tottenham? What was it? Just your friend who was a fan, or was there anything specific?
I mean, that certainly helped. But I think what drew me into them is I grew up a Knicks fan, so we were never really contenders as long as I can remember, not since the 90s. So I didn't want to pick your Man Cities, Man U, and I didn't want to pick enough of a bottom dweller where I'm like, well, I don't know how much English football championship soccer I'm going to watch, so I kind of want a team that doesn't have a chance of getting relegated. So, and then Brad just fed me Tottenham information all the time, and to be honest, they're on TV all the time. That really helped. They're always on NBC. Champions League 2 was huge. I work from home Wednesdays and kind of wander towards the television set at 2:45 generally on Wednesdays to watch Champions League, so that also helped. Also fell in love with Christian Eriksen, who might not be in Tottenham very, very much longer. Just the whole squad, Pochettino. It's just a great squad to watch, and not quite your top tier bandwagon fan, although this year you could argue that it is, but that's kind of how I fell in love with them.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to accuse you of being a bandwagon fan if you're a Tottenham fan. So I think you're safe. I think you're safe there. So how are you feeling about the transfer window? What do you think's going to happen? You guys have actually made some signings for the first time in a little while. Do you think you'll hold on to Eriksen? What are you feeling about the transfer window?
Eriksen's a tricky situation. I think you don't want to lose a player on a free, so getting some value for a player that seems like he wants to go anyway would be a good thing. It does seem like Levy's asking price of 70 million euros might be too rich for a lot of squads. I would not be surprised to see him on Tottenham next year. I do think they'd missed him a lot. He's kind of the maestro of the team offensively. I don't know who would step up to replace him unless they bought someone else in the transfer window. Obviously, Tanguy Ndombele is a very skilled midfielder. It does fantastic. He's like Sissoko plus from what I could tell watching his YouTube clips, but he doesn't seem to have the finishing ability that someone like Eriksen does. So if they do lose Eriksen, they will have to probably find some sort of attacking replacement. With that being said, Tripp just went on the way out yesterday. I see a lot. Where'd he go? He is at Atletico Madrid.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So that is interesting because Tottenham fans especially were just clamoring for him to get the hell out of there last year. And then you're seeing on Twitter and Reddit a lot of remorse. Oh, maybe we will miss him. I guess I'm kind of in the former camp where I'm glad to see him go, especially I think it was 25 million euros. You got some value for someone that honestly makes some boneheaded mistakes that cost you games every once in a while. They also, I guess the other transfer is back to Leeds. So there are rumors. I forget who off the top of my head, but they do have some youngsters that are probably going to get some time here in the ICC. Parrott, who might be Kane's backup. He'll probably play some FA Cup games is what I would guess. So I don't know. I like Tottenham. They're going to be good this year again. I've got no complaints about the offseason so far, especially considering Arsenal's offseason and how that's been going.
Not well for those who maybe aren't picking up what Mike is putting down there. So how
can I ask you a question?
Of course.
What do you guys mostly talk about? Are you MLS focused or a little bit of everything?
So a little bit of everything. I mean, we focus on European, obviously heavy England. So myself, I'm a Liverpool fan. I haven't kept that quiet. It just hasn't come out in our conversation. So my condolences for the Champions League final. Christian and I, so myself and my middle brother are Liverpool fans. Matt is a City fan, and he actually became a City fan in like 2008, so right before they started to get like crazy good. That's his
they've got
claim.
An interesting history, really, especially if you started watching them that time, in that time frame. Like, you can't hate anybody for being a City fan.
Yeah, I mean, they signed like Robinho and a couple of players, and like they were still just terrible. And so then within a few years, I mean, they weren't anymore. So he was drawn, I think, to the like blue jerseys. But we talk about that. We talk about American soccer. So we each kind of break up the podcast into different segments. Christian focuses on kind of general. Matt focuses on City and Liverpool, and then I focus more on American soccer. So could be anything. Could be national team. Could be MLS. So we're pretty broad, but we're talking about pretty much what you're talking about.
Nice, yeah. So. We are probably well-known MLS haters. I mentioned to you before we jumped on the air here. Probably not warranted because we don't really watch it. We throw it on every once in a while. So, I mean, tell me about your interest in MLS and what draws you to it.
So first off, it's a really interesting league because we're basically at the foundations of the league. It's like being kind of a Premier League fan back in like the late 1800s. And, you know, with the foresight of knowing how big the sport could be, and all of that. And so I find it fascinating because I think that the league is on such a great trajectory, and they're by no means perfect. And so they make tons of mistakes, but it's interesting to follow all of that and interesting to try to figure out what strategic decisions the league is making to try to look 5, 10, 15 years down the line to watch it grow. And so by no means do I think it's competitive with the Premier League or the Bundesliga or something like that right now, but it's interesting to look at what they're trying to do to become competitive, to become, you know, overtake Liga MX in this hemisphere, and then to ultimately challenge those European leagues. So that's what draws me to the league, obviously being a fan. Living in this country, I love and support, you know.
Are you an Earthquakes fan because you're in San Jose?
So I'm from Philly. We touched on that before we went live. So I'll always be, you can see a bunch of scarves here. I've been a Sons of Ben member since 2007 when, you know, 3 years before the team ever existed. So, you know, I will always be a Union fan. And so I'm enjoying this season so far. And, you know, again, it's interesting. I mean, clubs are literally sprouting up from nothing. And so they got to build infrastructure. They got to make decisions on how to invest in their academy. What are they doing kind of creatively within salary caps? And so for me, I think the league is fascinating from all those off-field perspectives. And then on-field, it's evolving and it's getting better every year. So that's what kind of draws me to the league.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think what I struggle with is, you know, what a lot of people struggle with in American soccer is no promotion relegation. And it does seem that's what drew me into Premier League too, is that the entire table is fighting for something. And I think that's interesting. But I have been reading a lot too, what you said about the league being young. You need that infrastructure and amount of teams in place to even get that instituted within a league. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to deny that the league's getting better. Whether I watched it or not is a different story at this point, but I'm sure we'll pick it up.
Yeah. And like I said before we went live, like there's no hard feelings or anything like that. There's so much soccer and so much choice available. I don't really care what leagues you follow or anything like that. I find it interesting talking to all fans. And so, you know, I certainly don't hold it against you or anything like that for not liking the league. And I'm just more curious and interested on, you know, maybe why you aren't interested in it. Is it just that the league is so young? Is it the quality level? You know, what doesn't draw you to the league?
I mean, I think there's a lot going on there. And I think I'm a new dad. My daughter is 14 months. So honestly, the fact that the Premier League's on in the morning is really helpful, and it's on every single Saturday and Sunday. And MLS doesn't seem to have a set schedule in place, and I can never quite tell when the games are. Like, you can't rely on Friday night at 9 having, the MLS game of the week, or maybe you can. Maybe I'm just ignorant.
No, dude, you're so spot on with that one. That is one of my biggest frustrations with the current television deal or just MLS in general. They don't have a set TV schedule. I know, being on the West Coast, games kick off at 4:30 a.m. You have one early game for the Premier League. Then you have a slate of 7 a.m. games. Usually it's anywhere from 4 to 6. Then you have the 9:30 game. And so with the Premier League, it's very structured.
Yeah, it's great.
With NFL football, the games are coming on at 1 and 4, and then you have the night game, and then you have the Monday night game. And so it boggles my mind that MLS hasn't adopted that model just to give people something that they know to look forward to.
I think that's honestly it more than anything. And also to the, like the mega corporation feel of it, where it's $200 million to buy into the league, just feels, I don't know, feels fake in a way that someone like a Salford City in England can rise up there in League Two now and can work their way up the ranks. And I think somewhere, I'm outside of DC, I'm in a little city called Rockville, which has a population of 1.7 million people that could support their own soccer team. And if you could form a team in this area that could rise up the U.S. soccer pyramid, I think that would just be intriguing. I'm always for promotion relegation. I say it till I'm blue in the face, but that's probably another reason why I don't watch. But as far as quality on the field, I think there's probably plenty to watch on MLS. I think I probably need to do a better job of picking out the players I should be watching from each team, because when I throw on a game randomly, I'm just like watching a bunch of randos that I don't know about unless they're USMNT teams. And, it's fun to like pick out a player on the team and follow him around and see what they're up to. So that's probably it too.
Absolutely. And I mean, the league is evolving, and they're constantly attracting better and younger players who are in all likelihood moving on to, we saw with Miguel Almiron. Yeah. So there's plenty of players. Jefferson Savarino for Real Salt Lake is kind of that player right now. He's getting a lot of buzz, potentially moving over to the Premier League. And so we're just constantly attracting players like that. So it's cool from that perspective. And I certainly don't hold it against you. The pro rel aspect is interesting, and it is something that MLS doesn't have. It's slightly disappointing because if this was 30 years ago and we had the fervor that we do right now for soccer before MLS started, who knows? It might be a different story. And it's just MLS evolved because it had to not have pro rel, but it's gotten to the point where it's almost like it's too big. It can't institute it. And that's kind of disappointing from my perspective as well, because you're seeing this groundswell of support all over the place. And I just don't know if we're there to be able to support pro rel right now.
Sure.
Definitely a possibility in the future, though.
Yeah, and I mean, do you see it happening in the next 20 years, especially if they get to 32 teams like they're talking?
20, I think we might see some version of pro rel. And so whether that is breaking the leagues into 2 separate conferences, and then you have like a Champions League almost style system, which is going to be like running concurrently, like a playoffs or something like that, or you ultimately have MLS buys USL or something like that, and then you have pro rel through that.
USL intrigues me the most out of all the leagues, just because of the size of the cities, and I think that's where you'll get those big supporter groups supporting those types of teams, and you get people marching to the stadium. Unlike in New Jersey, they're marching through Newark, New Jersey. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, what fascinates me again, because The issue with soccer in this country is that it is just open and anyone can start a league. It's not controlled. Whereas like in England, somebody just can't start another Premier League, or someone can't start a third division, right? It's all controlled from the federation. And in this country, we've constantly new leagues launching. And so I'm somewhat excited about a new league that's launching called NISA, which is a third division league. And what they're trying to do is come in with, hey, we're going to be open to pro rel right from the start. We're not going to have franchise fees. So I think they're only going to have about 10 teams. So they're not going to start with pro rel, but they're open to it in the future. And they're not going to have franchise fees. So touching on what you were talking about with 200 million or something like that, That's not going to happen. People can just start clubs, join the city, and then it's, again, controlled from more of a club aspect, whereas American leagues and specifically MLS is kind of centrally controlled with franchises. So
interesting.
I'm curious about that one. NISA, NISA. So
all right, cool. We'll check it out. Tweet it at us.
All right.
We'll bump it up.
All right, cool.
I have a quick question for you. Sorry, I always revert back to host attendance.
No worries. I'm liking this.
Especially since I'm new at soccer, I have the naive questions that I just feel like asking. But I've seen an MLS La Liga, or not Liga MX kind of competition. I don't know anything about it. So what do you know about it?
Yeah, so MLS and Liga MX are both keenly aware that the other market is incredibly valuable. So Liga MX is actually the most popular league in this country, in America. More popular than the Premier League, more popular than MLS, more popular than any other league, both with television viewership and fans and all of that. MLS, meanwhile, looks at Liga MX as the pinnacle of competition. And so both leagues are smart from a business perspective and looking at that, saying, we have to have ways that we can work together. We have a CONCACAF Champions League over here. It doesn't convey the same sort of feelings and competition that, the European Champions League does. So what Liga MX and MLS are trying to do is partner in various different ways to kind of see if they can work together more long-term. And so with this competition, which I think it's called it's not the Campeones. I can't even remember what this damn competition is called, but it's basically like 4 randomly selected teams from each league and are going to face off in a tournament. And then the championship is going to be in Vegas. Ultimately, though, what both Don Garber and the president of Liga MX have said is that they're seriously considering exploring ways that you could somehow merge the two leagues and we would have just a North American sort of league. And so that concerns me a little bit. I don't know how that would actually function, but it's interesting. I personally would just like more investment into CONCACAF Champions League, though.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. And I don't know really much about Liga MX at all, except I know that it's a little bit better quality than MLS from what I can gather.
Absolutely. That's spot on. So getting back to me interviewing you, if we're go with that. Yeah, absolutely. No worries at all. So you guys, we touched on it there. You guys focus mainly on the Premier League, Champions League, and US soccer. So was that always your plan from the beginning, or has the show evolved at all since you guys started?
That was always the plan from the beginning. It has definitely evolved where we are trying our best to get guests from all Premier League squads, especially at the end of the season too. We're focused on English Football Championship. We followed those playoffs. We got guests from those teams. So anyone that's a self-proclaimed expert can come on our show. We're really trying to do interviews as much as possible. As far as USMNT, I should say that I have been watching them since 2010, South Africa. So I've been a Premier League fan since 2 years ago, but I was more of like the bro-y, go USA soccer fan since 2010. But that being said, I did watch all the qualifying games, and my interest was always in USMNT. I had to convince the other two guys that is actually worth following and thinking about, which is kind of interesting. And I think give credit to US Soccer Federation in that they realized the World Cup brings in soccer fans. Of course, it brought me to Premier League and not MLS, what they were hoping. But I do love the World Cup, and I love national team. There is something fun about seeing your boys in red, white, and blue out there. And I think there's a lot of positives to be said about the team in its current form for sure. And even if you look at 2010, 2014 World Cups, they made it to the knockout stages. No one ever talks about that. That's legit as fuck.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, it's unfortunately on the back of it, they failed to qualify for 2018, but and I tend to skew more positive with my fandom as well. So I'm really excited about this team as well. What has you excited about the national team?
I mean, obviously all the Bundy Americans, Tyler Adams, McKennie, Pulisic too in blue, even though he'll be a Chelsea blue. You can't help but be excited about that. And it does seem like maybe they're thinking about him in that 10 role, which is where the U.S. likes to play him. And you see him as a playmaker out there. He's just so much better than everybody on the field. I do find it funny that there does seem to be an undercurrent of MLS fans that question his ability and say he hasn't earned a spot out there. Maybe I'm on the wrong Twitter channels. I don't know. But obviously what everyone else is excited about. I can't say I'm excited about Berhalter. The subs just seemed ignorant, and foolish. And seeing Tim Ream out there is intriguing. I don't understand that at all. So I'm probably, I'm just cliche in all my USMN team opinions, probably because I'm a Twitter follower of everybody, but a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. And I mean, you touched on a little bit. I mean, how'd you feel about their Gold Cup performance?
In general, I with the exception of the Curacao game, which was frustrating, and you saw a lot of old habits come about, I thought they played well. I mean, it's just the Gold Cup, win or lose. I feel like today, a couple weeks out, you're probably feeling the same about the team. Everyone's saying we beat Mexico or, lost to Mexico's B squad, but you definitely can't say that was our A squad. Someone like John Brooks would really help that back line, and perhaps even Yedlin. Although Reggie Cannon, we touched on this in our podcast, if Tyler Adams had been on, he probably would have played right back. There'd be no Reggie Cannon discovery. And perhaps Reggie Cannon can fill that right back spot, and Tyler Adams can finally replace Mr. Baldy. Fingers crossed. Nobody wants to see Michael Bradley out there anymore.
So I don't want to see him starting anymore. I'm not someone who says he needs to go off the pasture and never play with the national team again.
Sure.
I think that he can still serve some sort of purpose, but he shouldn't be starting, especially in the modern game. He just doesn't have the quickness anymore, and especially not in a two-man midfield against Mexico. That was just, again, mind-boggling decision.
He probably played one of his better games against Mexico. It is really the other games where is that man running in slow motion? And I was a Bradley supporter before I knew anything about soccer, 2010, but the 2014 World Cup, he was already starting to look out of place.
Well, yeah. So the reality is soccer is such a weird sport because players turn pro at 16. Bradley turned pro at 16 years old. So even though he's 31, which in a sport like basketball may not seem like a ton of miles on the legs and things like that, soccer, and he was just an all-action midfielder. Like, he legit might have the legs of like a 36, 37-year-old, And
that second goal, too, was...
Oh, my God.
His top 5 goals, I would encourage people to look up on YouTube. They're legit.
Yeah. He's a fantastic player, and it's unfortunate, he got a lot of blame for the 2018 World Cup failure, and at this point in his career, he shouldn't be starting high-level international games, and it really should be Tyler Adams. But again, I don't fault him, and I still have positive views on his ultimate legacy. So, yeah, that's
and
my
another
Michael
guy
Bradley.
that took the blame, Josie. I thought he actually played very well. It seemed like he's finally learning to use his body maybe a little bit, and he's been injured so much, he's probably got the legs of a 24-year-old. So. I actually wouldn't mind seeing Josie. I know that's probably an unpopular opinion, but as far as strikers go, Sargent might be a little green. Weah's green. I don't mind seeing Josie in the national team picture. Obviously, I would love if Sargent was starting, but as far as the on-the-field product during the Gold Cup, I thought Josie was one of our better players.
I'm 100% agreement with you on that one. I hope somebody displaces him, but right now, quite frankly, he is our best striking option. And so, I've always been kind of a fan of his, and I think there's a reason to it. He unfortunately didn't live up to his potential in Europe, and there was a variety of factors for that. Soccer's such a weird sport where, he probably shouldn't have gone to Hull or Sunderland, and that just kind of torpedoed a lot of his career, probably not even Villarreal, because that didn't work out. And so
he's on a lot of the worst Premier League strikers of all time lists. I think he had an insane amount of appearances and one goal, which is a little sad, but
yeah, it is unfortunate.
The goal might have been FA Cup.
I think he had like one goal or something like that. It definitely wasn't. It wasn't a lot of goals.
But he had 2 or 3 great seasons in Eredivisie. So I don't know. You never know with soccer. Wrong coach, wrong situation.
Exactly. So that's a little U.S. men's national team talk. Getting back to your podcast, I know you guys focus on Prem a little bit of Champions League and U.S. soccer. Is there anything specific that you guys like? Are you more tactical? Are you talking about more overarching things? Is there any sort of like focus for the podcast on like specific things that you talk about?
I mean, really the focus is on all things Man U and Tottenham, probably for the first 25 to 30 minutes. Jimmy has the most tactical knowledge. He's been watching the game. He was a goalkeeper growing up, played club. I played club soccer in America, which you can take that for what it's worth. I didn't learn much about tactics growing up, so I'm new to it. But again, focused on that, for newer fans, the podcast, I think it's a good place to ask these tactical questions. And then Jim has enough knowledge where really he does break it down for us. As far as another focus too, we keep it really low key. We're all drinking beer, and it's really just a bunch of friends conversing. And we like pulling guests on and kind of giving them a hard time, and we're foul-mouthed and irreverent and all that good stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's really just something fun to throw on and a way for friends to stay connected. They're both in Michigan. I'm in Maryland. We all went to college together, so it's that's kind of how we stay connected, and got a few followers along the way. We had a record month in June as far as listens go, but about 200. Which when we started it, we're like, well, let's throw it on the internet. Like people probably won't listen to it, but we're finding, especially with the interviews, because I think you pick up at least the person you interviewed is going to listen to it, and then maybe a couple friends. So we have shifted more towards interviews probably for clicks, but also because you're bringing experts on from other teams, and we are almost all Premier League and then Champions League as soon as that season gets underway. So we break down. I can't believe how much soccer I consumed last year. I was watching like 2 to 3, 4 games a weekend. So we break down any games that we watched. We try to pick out players that maybe people don't know about. We also focus on CONCACAF players in the Premier League. So we're big Miguel Almiron fans. Raul Jimenez on the Wolves for Mexico is fun to watch. Chicharito, of course, on West Ham. So I think it's exactly what our description says, the Americans' perspective in English Premier League soccer. I think English people would probably scoff at our knowledge level, but just being curious and learning a new sport while people listen. So a lot of times I say embarrassing things that show my naivety in the sport, but that's kind of the point as I see it.
Absolutely. Well, first off, congrats on the record, June. So hopefully that momentum continues. And then the other aspect of just having guests on is also cool because you get different perspectives. I mean, I like having people on. Obviously, the clicks help, but also it's good to have other perspectives. And so it's not just an echo chamber between the three of you guys. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, sports are interesting because you get two complete strangers, and here we are. We filled up 35 minutes of time already talking the same language. So I find it interesting. I'm learning the language more and more. I still feel like I'm not a native speaker, but you get this common language, and it's just, soccer is amazing worldwide. All the different leagues are fun to follow peripherally, and I think Americans' involvement in the domestic leagues, as a new fan, I feel like it's growing and becoming more intriguing, and I liken it to how the NBA is now an international game. Maybe we're like Spain, or I guess like Spain, where all the Spanish players are coming over and trying to play in the top leagues in the world. So I think we're at an interesting point from U.S. perspective on following all these international leagues.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can get on board with that. And then the other aspect, I mean, so the way you kind of keep in contact with your buddies is the same way that we all keep in contact. So it hits close to home for us at Bros Talking Soccer, because it's a way for me and my brothers to stay connected.
Are you the oldest brother? Where are you in the chain?
Yeah, I'm the oldest.
How old are the other two?
So I'm 30, Christian's 27, Matt is 23.
Oh, little young guy.
Yeah.
Is he the City fan?
He's the City fan, yeah.
Yeah, classic
the rebel
brother.
Yeah.
So what drew you into soccer? How long have you been watching?
So, I mean, I played growing up. We had Fox Soccer Channel basically as soon as it could, we could. And our dad, we begged him to get it. And so since 2006 or 7, we've been watching that. And so the 2005 Champions League final is really what drove me into following Liverpool. And so that obviously was their dramatic victory. Love the color red, played center midfield. Steven Gerrard was just like, my hero. And so that's what really drove me into following the sport. And again, right around that time is when the game started to appear more on television. The Union kind of started to hear rumblings of the fandom. So 2007 is when the Sons of Ben started.
Were they a USL squad before an MLS team?
Nah, man, they came up out of
existence.
Yeah. So what happened was MLS was at that point just expanding. And so what the Sons of Ben did was this group of guys in Philly started wearing shock blue. So this color blue is kind of the color. It's a color within the city of Philadelphia flag. And so it stands out. And they used to go to matches, like a group of like 15, 20, 30 people, do drums, have chants,
stuff.
And cheer for like a team that didn't exist. And so eventually like a broadcast caught on. Sports Illustrated did an article on them. And basically the Sons of Ben drew MLS to Philadelphia, and then they found owners to get involved. So it's kind of the inverse of the way that it works. Yeah. So right around that time, all that was happening. And so 2010, they launched, and that's when I went just head first into MLS. And, from there, I've just been all into, watching the games. But I also played,
Sure. And I did play growing up, so I wasn't completely new to the game. But, I don't know. It's just been a nice journey. I've enjoyed watching it. And I actually wanted to jump back real quick because I met Michael Bradley one time.
Really?
I was in Sarasota for a work trip. It was in January, right when Toronto FC was having a camp in Sarasota, and I'm walking through the lobby. Michael Bradley just walks right by me. I shook his hand, and at that time, I forget what year that was. Must have been like 2013, 2014, around there. Like when he first came back to Toronto FC in that time frame. But yeah, he was nice and gracious. I didn't talk to him for very long, but I did meet him.
Oh, that's a really cool story. I don't know if I've met any player, certainly not the profile of that. So that's real cool.
Sure. Just when you're not expecting it too. Like I was just kind of walking around the lobby of my hotel and Toronto FC was there. I wonder who else was on the team back then. I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Josie, I think, came a little bit later.
I think so. It seemed like they were making a point to buy U.S. players back after the 2014 World Cup, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and that was, so Dempsey kind of started that whole trend, and then, so Seattle started it, and then Toronto sort of jumped on, and then we had a couple others. The Union jumped on a little bit late, but we brought back Maurice Adu. So, yeah.
And you had a little Freddie Adu for a bit.
We did.
Also from Rockville, Maryland.
Oh, wow. It all connects, man.
It does.
Before we kind of wrap up here, I have to ask this. So your Twitter image is like a rejection letter from DC United, like credentials. Can we get the backstory on that? What is that?
Yeah. So like I said in the beginning part of the podcast, I've been a credentialed NBA writer for a very long time. So for shits and giggles, I was like, well, let me see if we can somehow get the podcast a credential to go to a DC United game and maybe ask Wayne Rooney a few questions. But I think what people probably don't know is the NBA. People with credentials will probably kill me for this, but it's very easy to get a credential for NBA. You start a blog and have a couple posts for a few games. Like their whole goal is to grow the game, and especially internationally. There's a whole international row of credentialed media people at every single Wizards games. So, and there's podcasts there. There's a bunch of people that just have podcasts that are credentialed media members. So I was like, yeah, I'll apply for a DC United game, see what's up. And yeah, lo and behold, got the rejection letter. Have since then declared that I hate DC United, very against everything they do. I forget who the name was. I blurred out the name of the person. Not too much of a dick, but yeah, I'm not. We decided we're not good. We were always like, we're too good to talk about MLS on the podcast. We're not going to do it. And lo and behold, MLS is too good for Rooster and the Devil.
You got to reject them first before they can reject you, right? It's a little bit of that.
Well, so if they ever come crawling back, yeah.
All right. Yeah. So if you're anti-DC, can I interest you if whenever you come around into MLS, check out the Philadelphia Union. They got a cool story. We're first in
your
the East right now.
It definitely got me intrigued. So maybe that's what helped me become a Premier League fan is picking a team. So maybe that's all I need to do for MLS to start paying attention. Yeah, and Philadelphia Union's in first in the Eastern Conference right now, right?
Yes, they are. And there's actually a whole documentary about the Sons of Ben. It's available on Netflix. So if you have Netflix, check it out. Yeah, check it out.
Sons of Ben. All right.
There you go. So that's my sales pitch for Philadelphia Union fandom. Anything that we didn't get into before I ask my final question here?
I think I think we've covered a good amount of ground. I'd be happy to have you on Rooster and the Devil if you're not above us on Rooster and the Devil. So
absolutely not. Yeah, I would love to be on. So thank you for that. But what's the thing I ask all my interview guests this? What's the thing you're most excited about happening in your soccer world? It could be fandom, it could be Rooster and the Devil, but what's the thing you're most excited about happening in your soccer world?
I mean, I have to say just Tottenham's upcoming season is very exciting. Pochettino stayed. We get a lot of guys back from injury. Dyer, Trippier's gone. I don't know what we'll do it right back, but I feel like that's an upgrade. Tanguy and Dembele is our highest record signing for Tottenham. There's so much to be excited for in that world. And also the Premier League season's only 3.5 weeks away. very exciting stuff. I think I don't know. I'm just such a soccer fan now. I can't believe I'm the same person that I was 3 years ago. Because I was like, soccer. No one watches that. Just a bunch of guys kicking backwards, holding on the ball too long. But it's just an intricate, beautiful game, and I think it will grow in the United States.
Absolutely, very poetic.
Except that last part, I fucked up the last part. But other than that, it was pretty good.
Well, yeah, that was very well said. And so, no, that's awesome. And so, again, we have all of your stuff linked in the video description and podcast show notes. But in case people are just listening, where can they find you online?
At Rooster Devil on Twitter, Rooster the Devil, all the places you get podcasts. I'll also throw a plug. There's an original song at the end of every episode, which, some of them suck, but some of them are okay. And I have fun doing the original songs. And at this point, I've done like 30 or so. So it's my views, apparently.
Different song every episode?
Different song every episode. Sometimes it's inspired by the episode. Like we've had a Bette Midler classic, Soar on the Wings of the Eagles. That's remade into a Rooster and the Devil classic. A lot of white boy rapping, if that's your thing. I was also very into the emo screamo scene, so that gets thrown in there. 32 years old, so like Brand New, Taking Back Sunday, all that shit. Yeah, but honestly, no one fact checks us. Just a bunch of guys talking shit. Rooster and the Devil. Check it out.
Awesome. That is hilarious. I've never heard of anyone ending the each show with their own song. So everybody definitely go check it out. If not for all the awesome content, definitely to hear this song. So Mike, thank you so much for being here. This was a ton of fun, man.
Dave, it was a pleasure. Anytime.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Drew, thank you for stopping by, leaving comments on YouTube, and anyone watching live in the future. What's that?
So what did Drew say?
He just said "Devil in the Cock" would have been a great title. So, yeah, we appreciate that. Anyone watching live in the future, thank you for watching the video. And this podcast will be out on Friday, July 19th. That's quick math. Yep, Friday, July 19th. And have a great day, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.
Bye.